Hello, nerds. Welcome to another episode of this bullshit. No, welcome to episode number 2 of Lessons in Getting Shit Done. Let's get into it. I got a comment on my first video that said, I can't remember who placed it, and I can't remember exactly what they said, but they just kind of wanted to know how to wrap your mind around designing for screen printing in general. And I thought that was a good question, and so this video is going to be sort of a very general discussion on how to design for screen printing 101, the basics, right? The stuff you're going to really need to know when you're doing this shit, especially if you're not printing yourself. And you have to hand your files off to somebody else. So we're mostly going to be talking about Adobe Illustrator in this one, but the principles and the ideas, they will relate to Photoshop and fuck you InDesign, guys. Oh, I also got a comment that too much cussing on my video, and I'll never get, the algorithms won't like me because I said bad words. I don't care. Sorry if I offended anyone. Okay, so we're going to be talking, I'm looking at my notes here. So we're going to be talking about layer management, pretty basic. I'm going to talk about trapping, basic but super important. I'm going to talk about color mixing, super important. Also going to talk about registration marks. And then I'm going to show you some examples. 3 different ways to kind of go about it. And let's get into it. Let's shrink my stupid, ugly face, and let's do this. Is that small enough? That's small enough. Okay. So what I've got here right now is I've got our mascot, lion mascot. This is just a very simple, Train says hello. This is a very simple example that I'm going to show you. This is what I'm going to call traditional style, right? We're going to talk color. We're going to talk screen printing 101, basic. This is a 3-color design. How would you get this ready for screen printing? Basic, okay? So what I always do when I'm designing something is I try to work in layers. But it doesn't always work out. So you can see this one, the artwork is on 1 layer. So that's fine too. But what you really need to do is you need to have an understanding of what colors are going to, how the layer of the colors are going to be printed, right? Because every color sort of has a inherent natural opacity to it. Does that make sense? So if I'm working on a white paper or a cream paper like I am here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print that pink color first, I'm going to print the gold color second, and I'm going to print that dark gray last, right? Because the black, typically, if you think about it like a coloring book or a comic book, that black is going to be the final color. A lot of people call that the key line. It's fine to call it whatever the fuck you want it. But that color is going to kind of be darker than all the other colors, and you can hide the other colors underneath. But then the decision comes what comes second, which comes first, and so on and so forth. So for this one, I have to know as I'm designing that the pink's going to go down first, the gold's going to go second, and the black's going to go last. If you have sort of, and you're not sure what colors are going to cover up other colors, it's typically just the darker colors will go on top of the lighter colors. As simple as that. So if I'm going to design this if I want to make this screen printable, what I always do is I would call this layer art, and I would kind of keep it the way that it is. And I'm going to copy it. There's 3 colors, so I want to do 3 additional copies of it. This is kind of how I work. I'm going to call this top one gray. I'm going to call this one gold. I'm going to call this one pink, right? I got everything off except this gray. Now this the way this file is set up, if I just delete these things, it will be, they're gone already, if that makes sense. But maybe you're designing in such a way. There we go. Delete that. An easier way to do this, obviously, would be select same fill color. Delete that shit. Select the pink. Select same fill color. Delete it. Right? So this is ready to go. The keyline layer, the darkest layer, the top layer is usually, it's always the easiest one to sort of color separate. Now let's move on to the gold. Now the gold is going to be trapped by the dark gray. Now what is trapping? Why do you need trapping? Trapping is you want the gold to have basically a stroke on it. Because when you print ink on paper, the paper will react in ways. It'll expand, it stretch, and move. And since typically most people are printing these by hand, registration, it moves around a little bit. So you have to have some allowances for the inks to look good over top of each other. So what is a typical trap size? It all depends on what your setup is. It all depends on how much ink you're putting on. If you're putting a giant flood of ink on your paper might be stretching a whole lot. And if that's the case, you might need to put a bigger trap. The minimum of trap is going to be like 3 pixels, 3 points. Call it 3 points. So I'm going to do 6 points here. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's kind of show you on a circle. Let's boil it down to this. So we got a circle. Oop, that is the wrong. There we go. Just going to divide these two. Okay, so this is my keyline part, the black, right? And this part's going to be printed, the gold's going to be printed first, right? But if that paper goes a little bit off or my registration's off, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a little hairline of white. No, you don't want that. So you have to be able to add a stroke, add trap to that. So you could also do it like this. Go up to path, offset path. And if you go to 0.04 inches is basically what 3 points is. So let's look. It's just underneath there. So you can sort of see the difference. That's kind of just how much trap we're talking about. And this is an 18 by 24 sheet of paper just to give you some sort of reference. This is sort of your minimum trap size. I'm going to change the transparency of this so we can see the trap a little bit better. Right? So there's our trap. Where these two colors are mixing, that's what's happening. Now you want to sort of keep your traps clean. You want to keep them as small as you can because not every color is completely opaque. So you are going to see some traps a lot of the times. They might be subtle, they might be minimal, but if you keep your traps clean, you're going to have better luck overall, right? So let's do this. Just like we did before, I'm going to select the same fill color, right? So things like this, where the ear and the eye, just print gold all the way underneath that, I think. You could put a stroke on it. It doesn't matter that much. I'm just going to get rid of that. Let's get rid of the pink. Select same fill color. Just ignore all this stuff on the left over here. We're going to get to that later. Oops. God, this new toolbar. Fucking the worst. So if I just I could add a stroke to that. So I'm going to go to the gray. I'm just going to group this, and then I'm going to set the transparency down on this. There you go. There's your trap. Right? That's about as simple as it gets. Oh, but look, there's a mistake here. Because this is printing on top of the pink, this doesn't need a trap. So we got to get rid of that trap. There you go. You can see how it's trapped. This one was pretty easy. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. So like, oh, I don't have enough trap because there's not enough stroke or an outline to it. So I have to make it skinnier. And that's just what you got to do. No big deal. Okay, so now the pink. So I've layered the layers in the order that I want the colors to print, right? So the pink is going to be trapped by the brown and the gray. So I'm just going to print the pink completely underneath that star. Let's do this, select same. That's weird. So already stroking that. Okay. Rounded edges on that. So the exact same thing. If we go around looking at this, you can see that the stroke is applied. And it's as simple as that. I wish it was as simple as that. But that is the idea. That is the basic idea. And then when I output these, I just have to change each color to black for my films. But you can see, there you go. That's it. It's easy as that. What I like, I like using layers like this instead of like multiple artboards. That gets really hairy. Also, like, oh, what if I accidentally deleted the star in my gold layer and I need to get it again and I need it to be in the exact same spot? I can just go into my art layer and I can grab it and just drag it up, copy it, right? And it's in the exact same spot because that art never moved on my artboard. Okay, so let's look at another one that's a little more. So here's an old poster that I designed in 2012. Fuck, that's a long time ago. Okay, so 3 colors again. This looks like a very simple design, but there's a really hard choice that had to be made with this one when I'm doing the color separations. Obviously, that dark blue is going to be, that's my trap, that's my keyline layer. We're going to call it that. That's going to be darker than anything. Anything underneath that is going to get trapped, right? But this blue and the red are very similar in value. So in blue and red, they never really trap each other very well. But in this instance, the red's going to go down first because this blue has a lot of white in it. White is pretty opaque. So if a color has a lot of more like pigment in it, a lot of pigment is not going to be opaque. Something that is a little more drab, like this blue, it's going to be a little more opaque. So red, blue, dark blue on this poster. So let's look at how the seps were sort of created for this. And I've sort of changed the transparency. So you can see my layers. I got the navy at the top, the blue, I don't know why it has exclamation points, red, and then art. So let's kind of look at this. So the navy is, once again, the easiest to do. Now each one of these has been turned black already because this is an old working file. And I changed the transparency so we could see the traps. So I'm going to turn on the blue. So everywhere that you see the blue, the dark blue, that's where it's being trapped under, right? So basically that was a matter of going around and creating these traps. Now what the fuck am I doing here, right? So there's a hard choice to be made when the trap comes to a point, right? Because this is going to be either red or paper color, I'm not sure. What you want to do is you kind of want to split the difference, right? So from this point, oops, sorry about that. you want to go 45 degrees. Now, the distance of this trap, you can see that these are kind of inconsistent in the width because it's pretty sloppy. But whatever, it should be good enough because that navy is going to cover them up pretty well. So I'm not that worried about making the traps perfectly perfect. As long as they're roughly between 3 and 6 pixels, it's totally fine. So let's kind of go around this and look. So you can see everywhere that dark line is, we have trapping. It looks like we probably needed more trapping there. But, you know, some is better than none. Right? So when you're coming down to a single point like this, it's just like a corner, but it's even more severe. So it's sort of cut in half and then brought around. It can get pretty complex. So you can see the trap here. Why are you doing it at 45 degrees like that? You're doing it at 45 degrees because if and when the registration is going to be slightly off, you want to have sort of the best of both worlds. Because if the trap went 90 degrees right here, and it was off a little bit to the left, I'm going to see a big mistake on that side. You know, so you kind of have to design your traps for the best case scenario, right? Like, look at these little traps. How annoying is that shit? Okay, and then we got the red to go on top. So the red, I just put it way down. So the red, I'm going to turn off the blue here for a second. The red is going... this is at 45 degrees angles. That shouldn't be. That's a mistake, but that should go straight across because that's not a corner. That's a straight line. So basically, the red is just going to be trapped by both. And if you kind of work your way down like that, it's sort of it can get very confusing overall because especially if you're working with a lot of colors and a lot of small shapes, it can get super confusing. But that's why you kind of always go back and refer to your art layer. Wait, which color went over what? Wait, did I lose that circle? Oh, crap. You know, that kind of a thing. And then after you're done with your steps, I always kind of rip them in Photoshop and colorize them and see if I did lose anything. Because I make a lot of mistakes because I'm always in a rush. You know, I also kind of want, while we're here, let's talk about registration for a second. So if you're printing at home, there's probably a good chance you don't have access to a giant paper cutter. A lot of people don't. We didn't for a long time. So to keep our costs down, what we did was we printed on 18 by 24 paper, you know, or whatever your standard paper size you want it to be. So we would get it cut by the paper mill or Lewis Paper here in Chicago, and they would deliver it to us pre-cut. So if it's pre-cut, how am I going to do registration marks? Because registration marks are typically outside the print area or the cutoff area. The trim size, I mean. And so how are you going to do that? So we came up with a way to do registration marks. Now, oops, what the fuck did I just do? So you can see I put registration on its top layer. Select all. So what we do is we create an X on the paper, on the 18 by 24. And then what we do is we put the registration marks on that X, on that line. So we angle the registration mark. I'm not sure why I'm pointing at my screen. Can't see me do that. I'm an idiot. We angle the registration marks perfectly along the line of that X. So when I have my first piece of paper that I'm going to be screen printing on, and I need my art to be centered on that page perfectly where I have it here, I just take my 18 by 24 sheet of paper and I draw an X. You know, way back in the day, we would be like, okay, we're going to put the registration marks 1/4 of an inch in. We'll make 1/4 of an inch box all the way around our piece of paper. One, that's a pain in the ass. Two, it's not as accurate as this. This is way more accurate. So once that you have that X drawn on your piece of paper, then when you go to your press, you can print. You just line up your registration marks along that X, and it will line up perfectly. And then once it's registered, you just put some tape underneath the screen. So you don't actually, you're just going to print the first 5 or so with registration marks on it so that I can register the next colors and so on and so forth. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see here. So we talked layer management a little bit. We talked trapping. We talked registration marks. Let's talk some mixing. right? Because not every color is meant to trap the next color. So let's go back to Lion-O. I don't know. We need a name for this little dude. If you have a name, write it below. That'll be real helpful. The funnier, the better. So mixing. So mixing is the idea that while you're on press, you could print. Oops, son of a bitch. Like a cyan, a magenta. You know, like our last tutorial where we kind of talked about this. But these two colors can be anything, and we can get a third color. But if you're mixing, then you can't trap. So it sort of limits your design choices in a lot of ways. So instead of, let's do some non-traditional colors or whatever, so we can sort of get a better understanding of. There we go. So we're not just working in CMYK, because those colors can be anything. But let's say this. I'm going to take these two colors. I'm going to unify them. Stick with me for a second here. So this design has mixing and trapping, right? So this is my key line. Geez, I hate that color black for some reason. Let's change it. There. So this is my key line color, right? Trapping these two ugly colors. So what does that mean? That means I have to consider mixing and trapping at the same time. So one way that you could kind of go about it, I'm just going to copy these. I'm going to divide them. If you don't use snap to point, start. So now I just want to add some trap to this. I'm just going to just organically. I'm not even going to measure this shit. Now I've got this set to multiply, so I can see my trap. It's going to expand it here. God, I hate what this is. Okay. You know, depending on how complex your poster is, I mean, you could spend days just doing trapping on this shit, which can be a pain. But oops. So there I'm mixing and trapping, if that makes sense. So I'm going to just take this, I'm going to copy, flip it. Oops, don't do that. So let's change the opacity of this to like 35% so we can sort of see. So now you can see that I've got the trap on the orange, I got the trap on the green, but when they touch each other, they're not trapping each other, right? Because I don't want that green to go all the way over here, and I don't want that orange to go all the way over here, because that's going to change my design. So you just kind of have to be cognizant of that process. But let's take it one level further. You know, let's talk about sort of the three different ways. I got some examples from other artists here I'm going to show you, and I'm going to kind of talk about how they handle color separation and shit like that. Okay, so let's go to this other layer I got here. Okay, so these first three are from the wonderful Aesthetic Apparatus, right? Let's call this Collage Style. This is a great fucking style for lots of reasons. One, it looks cool, but you don't have to be as concerned with trapping and spending a day doing adding traps and all that shit, because the colors kind of are just laid over top of each other. You can see that the orange, the green, and the yellow, they're all mixing with each other, and then the black is over top. But it's not sort of like a coloring book like my character was, my lion was, you know. It's not like a logo, right? These are more artful, right? Right. So in this one, I keep saying right. I'm so sorry. The yellow goes down first, red, and then black on top, right? This one, orange, green, yellow, black, or whatever, black on top. That's black on top on this one. So let's kind of go back to our character and design something in this style really fast. How about that? I have no idea what I'm going to do, but we're going to see. These are a bunch of sort of elements that I sort of just prepped so we could design something in this style. Let's call this Collage Style. Now this style is fun because your pre-press is way easier, right? So I'm just going to get rid of these colors. So I'm just grouping that together. So let's just kind of experiment here, right? So I'm going to have this lion tiff that we use. I'm going to make this, I should probably use those colors we were using before. Wouldn't that make sense, Bill? Jeez. Jeez. Now, this is not going to be a good design, but I just kind of want to show the sort of ideas. I'm already making excuses for myself. Fucking pathetic. Maybe these colors are going to mix. The old mascot, so I got some football. Found some old football plays. Graphic design is a lot like football, so as we all know, duh. I don't like that pink color. That's not really mixing well. Let's make it a different color. There we go. That's cool. Let's do magenta. So here we go. This is sort of a quick, very ugly collage style, right? So if I want to separate these colors, I can really easily just separate them without doing trapping without knocking things out, because I don't want to knock the pink out from where this is printing, right? Because there's all this cool texture stuff that I need to sort of preserve. So I'm just going to print this shit right on top of each other, right? So just like before, I'm going to make copies of it, and I'll get rid of everything on the layers. I don't know why my voice went up like that, right? And since these colors are mixing, I mean, I still want to put the black layer on the top. But it doesn't really matter how I color separate it, right? And that, even though this is a really shitty design here, if we look at the aesthetic apparatus, that is exactly what they're doing here. But there's sort of a combination as well, because like for you're gonna need to knock out the white that's gonna be around here, because I can't have the yellow going right up to the edge of the white letter forms, because I'm not printing the white. I'm knocking the white out. The same thing with this. There's going to have to be like a little bit of a trap on that red circle. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's kind of talk about, so here's another example. We're going to talk this is sort of traditional plus. That's what we're going to call it. This doesn't have what you would look at and say, oh, it's got a traditional key line, right? There's mixing of colors, but what this does, and I think this is a really good example. Okay, so this is Anne Benjamin. She's an amazing artist and also my wife, and I learn a lot from her. So let's look at this DuckTales Huey, Dewey, and Louie poster that she did. Now this was printed on this cement green French paper. But what's cool about this is this tan color. Obviously. It's also this tan color. It's also this tan color. It's also this tan color, right? It's also this tan color, right? Now you're like, oh, it's also this tan color. So the colors are opaque that are printed. Then this tan color is hit, and then the key line, which is this dark black. Or maybe, oh, you know what? Now that I'm looking at this, maybe the tan was printed last on everything, right? So I can get a darker value of yellow by just printing the tan as a transparent color over top of it, right? So that's sort of a great way, instead of like getting mixed up and like creating all these different values of, you can sort of print everything trapping each other, and then at the very end hit it with the transparent tan or gray or something like that, warm gray, and it will give you an additional value to all your colors. So here's this Tom and Jerry poster. It's the exact same thing, right? So this tan color in the leaf right here is this darker color in the ear, is this shadow, right? Is this part of the yellow, is this part of the uniform, this part of the blue, this darker part of the blue. All that tonal variation is achieved with just one color, right? And so it makes something as complex as this way more simple. I mean, still hard. Don't get me wrong. Still really freaking hard, because you still have to figure out what is trapping what, right? Because you've got this dark navy color, and that's going to trap the lighter blue. This blue is going to trap this blue. The yellow is probably going to go first. Everything is going to get trapped from the yellow. The red is probably going to go underneath this blue, but over top of this blue. It's really complex. So if you're in Photoshop, you're kind of just separating each one of these colors into their layers and then just sort of painting it on, or you can do expands, though you have to go back and edit when you do that. So another person that does this, the exact same thing, but sort of in a different way, is Ken Taylor. So if we look at his Alice in Wonderland poster, so you have this gray here. This gray is more than likely the same gray that makes her dark tone of her dress, that makes the dark tone of the skin, that makes the dark tone of the orange, right? So it's all these colors, bing, bang, boom, and then that transparent gray. Now he might be doing some more color mixing as well. I don't know. I've never seen this one in person, but he might be achieving this orange by mixing this yellow and red, or yellow and this magenta. It's hard to say without seeing it or actually seeing his files. But I can almost guarantee that this dark green color is the same gray as, you know, the straight up gray that's right here. So hopefully that makes sense. Now when he went through his files, this is more quote unquote coloring book style, right? Where he's got outlines to everything, and that color has to be trapped underneath that outline. Whereas on Anne Benjamin's stuff, it's more just sort of like color shapes with some line work. There's not outlines around everything. It's more of a mid-century illustration style. So here's another Ken Taylor's This Island Earth. I actually do own a copy of this one. I'm pretty certain that this dark tone of this red is the same gray color as the dark tone of the yellow. It's this dark tone of the blue. That sort of thing. So hopefully that's making sense. Excuse me. So here's another good example, right? So, and maybe slightly less intimidating example. I believe that this dark gray printed here is the same color that's printed here. If it's not, you don't have to do it like that. If Ken sees this video and says, "No, that's not how I do it. I just print a shit ton of colors," I would be shocked. Because I'm pretty sure they didn't print like 19 colors on this. They probably printed more like 12, which is still a ton. Maybe like 9. Okay, so let's go back to our example and let's kind of add a fourth color to it, right? I don't know why that was so hard for me to spit out. So let's go back to our traditional like color separations here. So this is going to be easier if I take this. I'm going to expand this. And then I'm going to unite it. I'm sorry, I'm sniffling. That sucks. I got another cold. I keep getting colds when I do these stupid things. Let's call this gray. Wait, we can't call it gray. Let's call it light gray. So I'm just going to copy these two shapes because I want those shapes. I want these shapes. Hey, bring me those shapes. I'm just going to turn that gray layer on so I can see what I'm doing here. So let's add a shadow layer to this. I'm not going to spend too much time adjusting it or making it too pretty because I suck. Let's just put his whole back foot in shadow. That seems to make sense. So let's give it this color here. Actually, let's do more of this color. I'm going to ungroup this stuff, actually. So I'm going to select these three, press Command 8, which makes a compound mask, or a compound shape, sorry. And then I'm going to select that gray and press Command 7. Oop, let's redo that. I forgot those toes. Command 8, Command 7, right? So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to hit multiply, because that's when you set something to multiply, that sort of imitates the mixing that's going to happen on screen, though never as much. Now that gray that I've done is too dark, so let's adjust. Right? So this is, we're kind of doing the Ann Benjamin, Ken Taylor sort of thing, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sneakily, I'm going to be able to get a second tone out of my pink. Let's just do it through his hand here. Let's just make all the shadows while we're at it. Sorry about that. This side of it doesn't have to be pretty, because it's going to be masked off. Sorry, I'm getting quiet. I'm actually designing, kind of. Now, this is probably, you know, if this was real, I would be spending more time with this and really, you know, tweaking it. But since it's just for you losers, I don't give a shit. Okay. So I'm going to make a compound mask of these guys again. Oops. Set this to multiply. See the results. There you go. So with that one gray color, I'm able to get this cool tone on the shirt. It looks a little weird right now, but you know, I can go in there and adjust it. I'm sorry, okay? God damn it. Okay, this is totally pointless. Okay, stop tweaking this shit. Okay. And then I could add some shadow in there too. So I got trapping on on all three of the colors. I've got mixing, and I got the keyline layer. Let's look at my notes. That's about it, really. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any more questions or want me to go into more detail on any of this stuff, this is very general. Just leave a comment like you did before. I appreciate everyone who's been watching. Follow me at twitch.tv/BillyDelicious. And that's it, I think. I'm sure I'll remember something on the way home. Maybe. Cool. See you guys.